Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals Ton Alive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a meal from scratch. I'm your host Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, all the things, so come find me. Today we're going to be talking about a man named Robert Pickton, and he's our first international case taking place in British Columbia, Canada. Now, Robert was mostly referred to as Willie, so that's what I'm going to refer to him throughout this episode. So, Willie and Robert are the same person, it's just Willie seems to be what everybody called him. Willie was born October 24th, 1949, in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. It was said that he was born with his umbilical cord around his neck, so there's some speculations that maybe he didn't get enough oxygen to his brain during his birth, which could have affected how he perceived things and his overall brain function. Willie's parents were Louise Helen Arnold and Leonard Francis Picton, and he had an older sister named Linda and a younger brother named David. Now, the family owned a pig farm and did farming in general, but specialized in pig farming. And it was said that they were very, very hard workers and they worked the boys to the bone. Now, as for Linda, apparently Louise didn't feel like a pig farm was suitable for a young lady. So Linda was actually sent later on to some family in Vancouver, and she was mostly raised by those family members. So she wasn't really involved with most of the day to day with the family, and she was kind of the odd man out. It seemed like Louise really favored the boys over Linda at all. So she does exist, but she's really not talked about much during this whole thing. Willie's father, Leonard, was said to be very quiet and completely uninterested in anything to do with the boys. He was just kind of there. Willie also described a time when he was 3 years old. He was left in the truck, and I guess he put the truck into gear and it ran into a pole, I believe. Instead of the parent being upset that he could have caused something, he beat Willie mercilessly. So that was one of the only memories that he really had about his dad. But he was there, he just really wasn't present. As for the boy's mother, Louise, it seemed like she definitely favored her sons, as I said before, and she really cared more about the day-to-day with the farm than it seemed like her husband did. And she worked the boys hard, even though she seemed to prioritize them, and she didn't seem to coddle them very much. One of the stories is that Willie cried too much as a toddler, so she would make him sleep in the chicken coop until he learned to not cry as much. It was also said that the family's hygiene was pretty poor. Apparently, there was no structure for when and where the animals could go. They could just come into the house as they please. So everything always smelt like animals, and there was a lot of dirt and mud everywhere. She just kind of let them come and go whenever. Because the boys had poor hygiene, obviously they got really bullied in school because they constantly smelled. It wasn't common for them to bathe or brush their hair or any of that. And if you've ever been around pigs, personally, I did FFA in high school, and it's not a good smell. It smells pretty bad, so I can only imagine the smell that was coming out of their home and their clothing. It's really unfortunate that they were bullied that hard, but at this point, it's definitely like his parents' fault for why they were not taken better care of. His parents were just emotionally cruel as well. When Willie was 12, he got this calf, and apparently he had a really good bond with this calf. He would run home every day from school and go and take care of it. And after a few weeks, he came home and he looked for it and saw that the calf was not in the pasture. He was looking around for it, and his father had told him, "Go look in the barn," which is where they slaughtered animals, and unfortunately, he saw his calf strung up. Apparently, it was a really, really emotionally hard point for him, and it was said that he wouldn't speak to anybody for a month after. His mother offered $20 for a new calf, and he just didn't want it. He wanted his buddy back, and unfortunately, they took it from him just to be cruel. Robert would meet one of his only friends in 1962. At this point, he was 13. He would meet Lisa Yells, and at this point, she was only 5 years old. Her family went to his farm for some meat, and he snuck her some hot dogs. And Lisa had also had a very hard upbringing, so this kind of stuck in her mind, and she remembered Willie. So later, they would reconnect, and that was a connection point for them, and we'll talk more about her later. In 1963, the family would buy an additional 40 acres, and I guess the community and a lot of fellow farmers thought that they were stupid for doing this because I guess the property that they bought had a lot of swamp areas, but they didn't want it for specifically farming. They wanted it for more pigs and to expand their livestock business. So that actually worked out pretty well for them. In 1964, Willie would go ahead and drop out of school, and Louise was actually really happy about this because she didn't want him going to school. She would rather have him home and working on the farm more. So she was actually happy about it, which is crazy to me as a parent. I would not be happy about my kids dropping out, but she just saw him as more labor, and unfortunately, after they decided that they were going to get this additional 40 acres and they were expanding their business, she really pushed him to start doing the slaughtering of the animals. And Willie denied her for a while, but because his mother and him were so close, she talked him into it because he just seemed to do whatever Louise wanted. And since their business was growing, it wasn't like this was a small task either. Willie was butchering up to 12 animals a day, which is quite a bit. So to have someone that didn't want to do that to begin with and being traumatized from seeing their animal being butchered as a child to now having to do that day in and day out, I can only imagine probably damaged his psyche further. Then in 1967, something even more sinister happened with Willie's younger brother David. On October 16th, 1967, David was driving along Dominion Avenue. Unfortunately, David didn't see Timothy and he hit him with his car. David didn't know what to do, so he called his mother, and instead of them calling an ambulance and trying to help Timothy, she rolled him into a culvert. And unfortunately, because of her actions, Timothy passed away. It was shown that he was still alive when she rolled him into that culvert, and he drowned in the few inches of mud and water that were in the culvert. So, had she called for help, he might have survived. Timothy's father, Philip Barrett, had been looking for him when he hadn't shown back up. He called his friend's house. His friends had said no, he left around 7:30, so he started driving up and down, and unfortunately, he found his son like that, which is completely devastating. When David hit Timothy, it caused some damage on the truck. So David went to a local mechanic at 8:30 at night and insisted that the truck needed to be fixed like right then and there. And this threw up some red flags to the mechanic. And when he saw the next morning that there was a hit and run, he reported David to the authorities because he connected the dots on that, which thank goodness he did. On December 19th, 1967, David was charged a little over 2 months after the incident with failure to remain at the scene of an accident, but there was no mention of vehicular manslaughter, and I could not find out why. I don't understand why he was never charged with vehicular manslaughter. I don't understand why Louise was never charged because if you wanna get technical, she is the person who ended up killing Timothy. If she had called for help, he might not have died. So I really don't understand why more didn't happen to these people, but they really deserved to go away for a long time. Obviously, this really soured how the community felt about the family. They already weren't a fan of them just due to their lack of hygiene, and they were very strange and kept to themselves. But the fact that they had murdered a local child and had gotten away with it caused even more rumors and gossip to spread, rightfully so. So they really never had a good standing in the community. Life seemed to go on for the Pictons, though. David would go on to marry and divorce, and Willie really didn't seem to have a lot of success with women. He kept a lot of female pen pals, and he did meet one that was named Connie Anderson in Michigan. He actually did go to visit her and even proposed. At first, she did accept, but wasn't willing to relocate, so they parted ways. By January 1st, 1978, Leonard passed away from cancer at the age of 91, and the following year, on April 1st, 1979, Louise would also pass away from cancer. It was said that really none of the children cared too much about their father passing away. Remember, he was abusive and he really wasn't present in any of the kids' lives. He was just kind of there. And it seemed like Willie was really the only one that cared about Louise passing away. Because remember, they were very close. He seemed to listen to everything that she said, and he was very obedient to her. So it seems like David really did not care, even though she basically murdered somebody for him. He really didn't show any loyalty to Louise. And he was honestly excited that she was gone because after that, they inherited everything, and now the land was worth a lot more money, so they just kind of went on with life as usual. David would start actually integrating himself with the local Hells Angels biker gang, and Willie started tinkering with vehicles and found out that he was pretty mechanically gifted. So the brothers opened a chop shop, and they were investigated multiple times for stolen cars, but it didn't seem like anything ever came of it. So they started dabbling in that and dabbling in organized crime along with the Hells Angels. I'm not sure if they were ever members, but they definitely were involved. It was also around this time in 1980, sex workers in Vancouver's downtown East Side district started disappearing pretty regularly. Of course, the local police didn't take any of this seriously. People would come forward and try to fill out a missing persons report about their family member, and they would just be met with their transient. I'm sure if you looked hard enough, they're in another county. But about now in 1980 to when Richard Pickton was caught, there was about 60 women who went missing. Some of them were found, a lot of them were not. It's clear that there was an issue and the police just didn't want to deal with it. In 1996, the Pickton brothers founded a charitable organization called the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. And while that sounds like a good thing, it really wasn't. It was just a headquarters basically for them to organize crime and throw wild parties and drink. So it was just a way to avoid taxes, from my understanding. I should also mention at this time that the children, so Linda, David, and Willie, were doing very well financially, mainly because the farm's land appreciated in value so highly by this time. So the farm was assessed at more than 7 million. So they started selling off parts of the farm and divided up the assets. So they all had become very wealthy at this point. I should also mention that one of Willie's only friends, Lisa Yell's the girl that, bought meat from his family early on. So they reconnected years later as adults, and she was really his only friend. It was said that they did not have a romantic relationship, but she would hang out with him on the farm and would help him slaughter the animals and do what he needed to do and kind of took care of him like an older sister would, I guess. So at this point, which is around 1997, Lisa moves away And it seems like there was an uptick in disappearances and things happening. And they think part of that is because when Lisa moved, it allowed Robert or Willie to have more time on his hands alone. On March 22nd, 1997, Willie drove downtown to the east side and picked up a sex worker named Wendy. He offered her $100 to go back to his home. While that wasn't usual, she decided to go ahead and do it because it was more money that she would have made since she had to go with him to back to his place. So they go back, and Wendy says that the trailer is absolutely filthy, but they decide to do what they were paid to do. So they have intercourse, and after she goes and decides that she wants to shoot up, then she wants to call her boyfriend from his phone, and Willie says no. He did allow Wendy to look at a phone book and get the number for a hotel room that they were staying at with her and her boyfriend. So, as she was looking through this phone book and she was distracted, he slipped behind her and put a pair of handcuffs on her left wrist. Before he could get the other one on, Wendy started fighting. She started biting and kicking and doing whatever she could to keep him off of her. So she backed into Willie's kitchen and she grabbed a butcher knife that was on the table. Unfortunately, when she went to grab it, she did cut herself in the panic, but she still got a good slash on Willie's cheek and sliced it open. While they both struggled for the knife, they actually cut each other pretty badly. Willie cut Wendy's stomach and partially disemboweled her, and Wendy was able to cut Willie, and this caused a lot of blood loss, and he actually passed out pretty soon after. Wendy was also not doing so hot, but she was still going. She ran out of the trailer and went to the nearest two houses that she could see. Nobody answered, and then she found a car on the road that stopped for her. She was picked up by a nice elderly couple, and they took her to the hospital, and she arrived around 2 a.m. on March 23rd. Her injuries were pretty severe, and they honestly were not sure that she was going to make it at first, but she did end up pulling through. When Wendy pulled through, she was actually able to tell the police everything that had happened, but unfortunately, it seemed like they didn't take her seriously. Once again, because she was a sex worker and she had some addiction issues, they didn't really see her as a real person and assumed that she had a hand in what had happened. So while they did charge Robert with attempted murder, it really didn't go far because they had said that they weren't sure that she was a credible witness. Willie also survived. He had over 100 stitches, mostly on his arm, back, throat, and jaw. Wendy even stabbed him so hard in the mouth that she sliced off the tops of multiple teeth, so he couldn't eat very much. Honestly, good for her. I'm glad that she caused some damage. Because Willie was in rough shape, they had called Lisa Yells to come and nurse him back to health because he really couldn't do much for himself. So she came back and she said that she did not believe his story. Willie had said that a sex worker tried to rob him and that he resisted, so she stabbed him. And she did not believe this at all. She started to look around his trailer while she cleaned, and she found a stash of ID cards and other personal effects belonging to women that she'd never met. So she decided to turn it over to the police. Willie was arrested April 8th, 1997, and he was charged with attempted murder. I guess Wendy was too terrified to face him, and David Pickton hired a private investigator to look into her past to discredit her. And unfortunately, because of this, Wendy was a no show and the charges were dropped. After this, it seemed like a lot of the local sex workers found out that Willie was not a good guy to work for. And obviously, it got out that he tried to kill Wendy. So, sometime around September of 1997, Dave started recruiting sex workers for Willie. So, remember, Dave is his brother. He met a woman named Renata Bond on the downtown east side and offered her $100 to find a woman to give Willie oral. And so this kept happening. He would come to her and ask her to find women for him to give to his brother, who wouldn't mind going to the farm and wouldn't put up a fuss. To me, this sounds like his brother was complicit and maybe even knew about what Willie was doing and definitely assisted, because why on earth would you continue to get women to come back, and why not go to the same sex worker and over again? It was never the same woman coming back to the farm. So I think that David knew more than he was ever letting on. During all of this, the police continued to just bury their head in the sand. They continued to deny that there was a serial killer. They would not acknowledge that more and more women were disappearing. And it took a lot of the victims' families to hold rallies and journalists to come forward and point out the inconsistencies, but they really tried to bury this. They did not want to deal with it at all. Finally, in April of 1999, they offered a $100,000 reward for information on the missing women, but it still didn't go very far. About this same time, there's a woman named Lynn Ellingson who also lived at the Pickton farm, keeping books and doing odd jobs. So one of the nights, Willie took Lynn over with him to the downtown east side, where he intended to find a sex worker. They picked up a young woman with short, dark hair that was willing to come back to the farm for the night. When they went back, they apparently did some drugs together, and Willie got impatient and asked the sex worker to join him in the bedroom. Lynn went back to her own room at this point and said that she continued to get high. And at some point, she saw that the light in the barn was on and went to go investigate. When she walked into the barn, she actually saw the sex worker that they had picked up earlier was hanging on a meat hook, and she says that she specifically remembers that her toes were red, and that has stuck with her. Unfortunately, Willie caught her and told her that she was just like the pigs that they slaughtered at the farm. Lynn said that she promised that she wouldn't tell anybody and wouldn't ever talk about it again, and he did let her go. After Willie let Lynn go, she called a cab and went to a local bar and just got super drunk because she didn't want to remember that. He had threatened to kill her if she had said anything. So she just totally tried to bury the memory. In May of 1999, the Vancouver police established a new missing persons unit headed by Detective Constable Lorimer Shaner. Unlike the other officers, it seemed like he actually cared. He strongly suspected that there was a serial killer in the area, so he kept pushing to investigate, and he highly suspected Robert Pickton of doing something to these women. He tried really hard to get a search warrant for the Pickton brothers' property, and unfortunately, he developed post traumatic stress disorder from the guilt about not being able to do anything about it. At the end of 2000, he decided to be transferred because he was so upset and depressed about not being able to do anything. He tried going to the mounted police, he tried going to his superiors, just nothing seemed to work. He was just stopped every which way, even though he highly suspected that Willie was responsible for all of these disappearances. Still, nothing would happen until February 5th of 2002. And the sad part is that they weren't even there on a warrant for the missing women. They were there to find unlicensed guns believed to be in Willie's possession. So after the police started searching around and they found these guns, he was taken into custody and they obtained a second court order to search the farm as part of the missing women's investigation, when personal items were found, including a prescription asthma inhaler belonging to one of the missing women and many other personal belongings, such as licenses and jewelry and things of that nature. On February 22nd, 2002, Willie was charged with the first 2 counts of first-degree murder, but by May 26, 2005, he had 27 first-degree murder charges. Because this was such a long time coming where there were so many women missing and there were so many parts of bodies found, excavations continued through multiple years, and it's been assessed that it was over 70 million for this case because of all the people that they had to pay. There was over 100 different anthropologists shifting through like mud and pig fecal matter and just different things to try to find because there was no full intact bodies on the farm. There were just pieces of missing people. On March 10th, 2004, it was revealed that human flesh may have been ground up and mixed with pork from the farm. The pork was never distributed commercially, but it was handed out to friends and visitors of the farm. There was also a claim that he fed the bodies to the pigs as well. And later, they did find human remains mixed in with the pork in the freezers. So it was definitely confirmed that that's what they were doing. Some of the evidence that they found was multiple skulls cut in half with hands and feet stuffed inside. The remains of another victim were stuffed in a garbage bag in the bottom of a trash can, along with her bloodstained clothing found in the trailer. Another victim's jawbone and teeth were found in the ground beside the slaughterhouse, along with many, many other things. The court also played a couple videotapes of Pickton's friend, Scott Chubb, saying that Pickton had told him a good way to kill a female heroin addict was to inject her with windshield washer fluid. A second tape was played for Pickton in which an associate named Andrew Bellwood said Pickton mentioned killing prostitutes by handcuffing and strangling them, then bleeding them and gutting them before feeding them to pigs. Obviously, he had been saying this to multiple different people, just nobody came forward until it was too late. Unseen 2002 footage of Willie Pickton confessing to his cellmate, who was an undercover officer, began to circulate around 2010. And the video is of Willie bragging about using a rendering plant, which is a machine used to safely dispose of animal waste, after butchering to dump his victims. He then laments that he was caught before he could kill 50 women. He says, quote, "I was going to do one more, make it an even 50. That's why I got sloppy about it. I wanted one more, make the big 50. I would have played this video for you, but honestly, it's really hard to hear, and there's a lot of random talk, and some of the words are unintelligible, even with subtitles. So that was the gist of it. You can look it up on YouTube if you so choose. On December 17th, 2007, Willie was convicted of second-degree murder in the deaths of 6 women: Serena Abbotsway, Mona Lee Wilson, Andrea Jodesbury, Brenda Anna Wolfe, Marnie Lee Frey, Georgina Faith Papin. Willie also stood accused of first-degree murder in the deaths of 20 other women, but unfortunately they didn't have enough evidence to fully convict him. And those women were Jacqueline Michelle McDonald, Diane Rosemary Rock, Heather Kathleen Bottomley, Jennifer Lynn Firminger, Helen May Hallmark, Patricia Rose Johnson, Heather Chinook, Tanya Holick, Sherry Irving, Inga Monique Hall, Tiffany Drew, Sarah DeVries, Cynthia Felix, Angela Rebecca Jardine, Diana Melnick, an unidentified woman, Deborah Lynn Jones, Wendy Crawford, Carrie Kolsky, Andrea Faye Boyhaven, Cara Louise Ellis, aka Nikki Trimble. So all of these women were also suspected of being murdered by Willie. Regardless of not being charged with the other 20 murders, I guess the most severe sentence Canada holds is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility for parole for 25 years. If someone is from Canada and they could confirm that for me, that would be great. I'm not super knowledgeable about the laws in Canada. That's just what I read. So He would have been eligible for parole in 2027. Before that could happen, though, Willie was attacked by a fellow inmate, Martin Charest. According to the court filings investigation, he locked himself in a room with Willie and attacked him with a broken broom handle. Willie was airlifted to the hospital and placed on life support following the assault, but he died in intensive care 12 days later. The inmate stated in court that he committed the acts because Pickton had bragged about the murders. So he died on May 31st, 2024 of last year. And honestly, I don't think that anybody is sad about it. For this meal, I decided to make fried pork chops, applesauce, Brussels sprouts, corn casserole, and pumpkin cheesecake. It was all pretty good. I really enjoyed the pumpkin cheesecake and the homemade applesauce. It was very much a fall inspired meal. So, since we're getting into the spooky season, it was all pretty good. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have any comments about this case, let me know down in the bottom. Make sure to follow me if you aren't already on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, all the things. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.